Amateur Radio News and Notes for Friday, May 23rd, 2025. I'm Ed Kavik, November 2, Echo Charlie. In the log this week, we'll be talking about the CQ-WPX CW contest happening this weekend, May 24th to 25th. We'll have a recap of Dayton Hamvention. Also have a recap of the QRP ARCI 4 Days in May event. Also, Yaesu demonstrates and begins sales of the FTX1 radio at Hamvention. We'll also be reminding you that the MVARC breakfast will not be happening this weekend, but rather next weekend. We'll talk about some MVARC Nets on the air. Also, see what's happening with DX, have a solar activity update, talk about some upcoming contests, and also, as always, learn about some interesting online radio content. This weekend brings one of the biggest contests of the year, the CQ Worldwide WPX contest on CW. This is another contest where you can work a ton of DX, but what makes this one special is that everyone can work everyone. The WPX part is referring to an interesting component of the contest where different call sign prefixes are the multipliers. So for me, the prefix would be N2. So if you worked me, you'd get a multiplier, but W2 would be another, as would K2. Throw in a different number in there, and you get still more. So the points escalate quickly, and almost all contacts are good contacts. The contest starts at 0 UTC on Saturday, May 24th. That's 8 p.m. Eastern on Friday night, and ends up at 23:59 UTC on Sunday, or 7:59 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. During that period of time, a single operator can work 36 of the 48 hours, and any off times must be a minimum of an hour with no contacts logged. Bands allowed for the contest include 160, 80, 40, 20, 15, and 10 meters. The exchange is RST plus a serial number, so 59952 if you're someone's 52nd contact. Make sure to get the serial number as it is required to match for the QSO to count. The final score is the QSO points times the number of prefixes worked. QSO points are 3 for contacts on different continents on 10, 15, and 20 meters, and 6 points on 40, 80, and 160 meters. On the same continent but different countries, points are 1 point on 10, 15, and 20, and 2 points on 40, 80, and 160. And finally, contacts made in the same country are 1 point on all the bands. The prefix multipliers are applied only once, regardless of band or frequency of operation. Prefixes are the combination of letters and numbers on the first half of the call. So N4, W4, WA4, CR51, Lima Yankee 1000. They're all separate prefixes to be counted. For entry, single operator categories include high power, not exceeding 1500 watts, low power, not exceeding 100 watts, QRP, not exceeding 5 watts, and there are a bunch of overlay categories that can be entered alongside your main category, like Tribander, Rookie, Classic, and Youth. Check the rules for details on these. There are also multi-operator categories, including Multi-1, Multi-2, Multi-Unlimited, and Multi-Distributed. Again, check the rules for the full details. Rules and more information can be found at cqwpx.com. With us being near the top of Solar Cycle 25, this will be a great opportunity to work the world. Have fun, and good luck. Last weekend, your author had the pleasure of attending Dayton Hamvention in Xenia, Ohio for the 3rd year in a row. As always, a great time was had, and there were lots of old friends to see and plenty of new ones to meet. The fairgrounds were packed with vendors and amateurs. Some international vendors like Begali Keys and QRP Labs reportedly brought lower stock this year due to concerns with tariffs, with Begali reportedly selling out of their stock on Saturday. Lots of new gear was announced and displayed at Hamvention this year, including the new FTX1 radios from Yaesu, and more on that later. Also announced was a new power management system from Buddy Pole called the Power Pro, slated for release in mid-July, that incorporates backup power management and charging with an integrated MPPT solar charging controller. As usual, there was an absolutely massive flea market with lots of gear on sale, and even with it being a 3-day event, seeing everything is definitely a challenge. There was also an extensive list of forums to attend, covering a wide range of topics, from POTA and SOTA to using digital technology for shack automation, antennas, balloon communications, amateur radio on the International Space Station, contesting, and my favorite, CW. The Long Island CW Club had a great panel presentation about the club and the renaissance of CW that I thoroughly enjoyed. The forums were live streamed this year, and you can check them out on the Dara Hamvention YouTube channel. All in all, it was a great weekend, and I look forward to next year. On Thursday, May 15th, 2025, the QRP Amateur Radio Club International held their annual conference, 4 days in May. The conference is one of the premier events in amateur radio, with a great lineup of speakers going into technical subjects of interest to the low-power operator. This year, Jack Purdom, W8TE, and Al Peter, AC8GY, gave an update of the T41 EP radio project 7 years later. Ashar Farhan, VU2 ESC of HF Signals, presented a messaging system based on FT8 for more reliable QRP communications via his HF messenger. Nick Kennedy, WA5 BDU, gave the crowd an introduction into LT Spice for digital circuit analysis, a very useful tool for the homebrew builder. That was followed by Dan Kellen, AI6XG, who showed us a vacuum tube-based CW transmitter for SOTA. Yes, you heard that right. That incorporated technology from each decade in the last 100 years. Bill Kelsey and 8ET gave a history of FDIM with proceedings from the past and memories of the people who made it possible. Jason Mildrum, NT7S, took a look at the potential replacement for the SA612 mixer chip that has been a mainstay of homebrew projects that has left active production, complete with a proof of concept and a good amount of analysis. Hans Summers, G0UPL of QRP Labs, gave a fascinating talk about how he was able to bring SSB to the QMX radios via a firmware update. It was an amazing technical feat and allows the QMX to be one of the most effective and inexpensive multiband and all-mode radios on the market. And finally, we were treated to globe-trotting Ross Ballantyne VK1UN's presentation, where he showed us how he was able to operate from hotels in some of the most remote and challenging places on Earth, making whisper transmissions on all bands, including 2,200 meters and 630 meters, using incredibly clever impedance matching networks of his own design and simple wire antennas. He also talked about plans to run tests on the unlicensed 8.9 kilohertz very low frequency band in the very near future. Videos of the presentations can be found on the QRP ARCI YouTube channel. It was a fascinating set of talks with a completely filled auditorium. That evening brought Vendor Night, where QRP radio and accessory makers of all sizes showed off and sold their coolest gear. Your author picked up some parts from QRP Me, a few kits from QRP Labs, and some paddles from Adam K6ARK, Vince VE6LK, and Ara N6ARA. Saturday night brought the banquet with a few new inductees into the QRP Hall of Fame and a whole lot of prizes being given away from donors. As always, the event was a high point of the trip to Dayton. After all the hype and excitement surrounding the announcement of the FTX1 radio and pre-sales being opened up, there was a lot of speculation about whether we would see them sold at Hamvention. On Friday, the speculation was able to be laid to rest. Yaesu had several of the radios available for hands-on inspection. If there was one refrain that I heard over and over at the show, it was that the radio was larger than anyone expected. It certainly took me by surprise. The radio is about the width you would expect from a full-size HF rig. In its field configuration, the QRP unit, it does not go nearly as deep as a full-size radio. That said, with the Optima 100-watt amplifier unit, it resembles a full-sized HF radio. There were a limited number of FTX1 field radios for sale at Hamvention at Ham Radio Outlet's booth. This spurred some controversy as they were being fulfilled before the pre-orders on their site. There were some upset folks on the internet, and some even went so far as to cancel their pre-orders in protest. Now, with vendors having stock, it seems likely that pre-orders will ship from the usual sources. And now let's talk about the MVARC breakfast and meeting. Due to the Memorial Day holiday this 3-day weekend, MVARC will not be holding our breakfast and in-person meeting on this Saturday. Instead, we will shift both to Saturday the 31st to better accommodate everyone's schedules. We look forward to seeing you next week. And now let's talk a little bit about some of the MVARC Nets on the air. We have our 2-meter FM net every Tuesday at 7 p.m. on the repeater, and that's immediately followed by our digital net using Yaesu's System Fusion C4 FM. There's also the MVARC Slow Speed CW Roundtable on Saturday and Sunday mornings at 7:30 a.m. on 3.565 megahertz on CW, going about 12 to 15 words a minute, or however slow you need to be comfortable. Also, there's the MVARC Cherry Tree Net on Saturday and Sunday at 8:30 a.m. on 3.920 megahertz lower sideband. And as always, we'd love to have you join us. And now let's talk about what's happening with DX. As is customary on the weekend of a major contest, there will be a lot of DX on the air due to CQ Worldwide, WPX on CW. Stations on the air include the U.S. Virgin Islands, São Miguel Island, Cabo Verde, Barbados, Niue Island, Chatham Islands, Aruba, Martinique, Koror Island and Palau, Bonaire Island, Falkland Islands, Majuro Atoll, Marshall Islands, Marcus Island, Minami-Torishima Islands, and Antarctica. A calendar of DXpeditions can be found at dxnews.com/calendar. And now it is time for a solar activity update. As we go to press, the solar flux index was 120 and the estimated sunspot number was 99. Over the last week, the SFI has decreased. Solar activity has been at low levels in the last day, with 8 numbered sunspot regions visible here on Earth. The KP index is expected to briefly reach 4 today, and no G1 geomagnetic storm conditions are likely in the near term. The chance of solar radiation storms at the S1 or greater level is low at 1%. R1 to R2 radio blackouts are possible with a predicted probability at 25%, and R3 or greater blackouts are unlikely with a 5% chance predicted. There's a chance of 6-meter propagation, so keep an eye on the band and the spotting clusters to be ready for the next time the magic band does its thing. HF conditions have been favorable overall, and it remains a fantastic time for amateurs of all license classes to get on the air and work the world. Good sources of real-time solar information include spaceweatherlive.com and solarham.com. Good overview of conditions can be found at dx.qsl.net/propagation. And to see D-layer absorption data and associated radio blackouts, go to the NOAA D-region absorption predictions page. To see real-time maximum usable frequency, or MUF, and critical frequency, or FOF2 information from RadioSON data, visit prop.kc2g.com. And now for a look at upcoming contests. Well, as we mentioned before, the CQ Worldwide WPX contest on CW will be on the air all weekend. The QRP ARCI will have its Hoot Owl Sprint, but aside from that, there will not be much else on this weekend because of the CQ Worldwide kind of dominating everything. As always, the K1USN, SSTs, MSTs, and CWTs will also be on the air. The full contest calendar with events and exchanges can be found at contestcalendar.com. And finally, let's take a look at some interesting online radio content. Matt M0DQW takes a look at the iRadio UV98 Plus. Mike K8MRD shows his Hamvention haul. Not Just a Hobby spotlights Tim K5OHY and CW. This is a really good one. I really enjoyed this video. Matt M0DQW builds a UHF low-pass filter. Kevin 2E0 Whiskey Mike Golf kayaks to a salt marsh for some QRP fun. Hayden VK7HH takes a look at a big lithium iron phosphate battery. Josh KI6NAZ takes a look at the Buddy Pole Power Pro at Hamvention. Matt M0DQW upgrades his SI 4732 firmware. Jeff KF0MYB installs a GPS antenna at his shop. Steve KM9G does an antenna shootout. Sean W9FFF takes a look at the Gozizu 80 to 10 meter NFED half-wave antenna. Matt M0DQW uses a 23 centimeter Yagi for DATV. Dougbo KD7DUG activates POTA on the Santa Rosa Plateau. ARA N6ARA shows the fascinating engineering process behind his tiny Gwant antenna. ARA N6ARA once again gets ready for FDIM and Hamvention. Kevin 2E0 Whiskey Mike Golf experiments with parasitic antenna arrays. Mike K8MRD muses on failure as an opportunity to learn. Save It for Parts tries to make a satellite ASL rotator. Hayden VK7HH takes a look at the Renovis MA1. Matt M0DQW has his first QSO on his homebrew SDR. And Mike K8MRD makes a linked dipole. And that's it for this week. I'm Ed, November 2 Echo Charlie for Amateur Radio News and Notes. Thanks, as always, for joining us. Best 73. I hope you have a great week ahead, and we look forward to seeing you next week.